How's it going, YouTube? Tyler Polaris here, guys. Going to be showing you all how to set up your duty belt for law enforcement and how it works for me, and maybe some tips and tricks of what to carry on your belt and all that stuff and where to put it. Real quick disclaimer, okay? I'm in no way, shape, or form an expert at this. This is just what works for me through trial and error of a year and a half now in the profession, and I even have the nickname at work of Galls because I've bought and tried so much stuff that I literally got the nickname Galls because I've bought so much stuff from them. So, anyways, guys, so here we go. Okay, so gonna start on the front side and move my way around. And then I'm going to explain some other attachments and reasons why, yada yada yada, so on and so forth, about why I've changed stuff or why I don't like stuff there from what I've experienced. Okay, so first off, in the front here I have my key ring holder. I have it in the very front because, well, it's kind of easiest there. I have it in the front right due to the fact of my 3-mag carrier. It throws off where I can put stuff. If I had a double mag carrier, I could fit stuff a little better. Okay. Next, I have my handcuffs. I carry one set of hinged and one set of chained. That's just my personal preference. Most people just carry chained. I carry hinged and chained, and I carry hinged in the front. Because those are the ones I primarily use. So that's that. I custom made this case. I did it really ghetto-ly. I like to have all my stuff accessible from the open top. Granted, you're going to get people that are like, oh, well, what if the weather gets to it, yada, yada, yada. My philosophy behind this is it's kind of the same thing as your weapon or any other thing on your belt. If it gets dirty or the weather gets to it, you just clean it. So that's just me. Most people have a cover on their handcuffs. I don't care for them. So that's just me. Next, in between my holster and my cuff case is where I put a belt keeper. My holster is next. Kind of obvious. Next, with the holster, as you can tell, I took a hacksaw to the level 3 hood and I cut the level 3 hood off. I have a Safari Land holster. It used to be a level 3. Now it's a level 2. And I learned that I liked the level 2 only from going to the range and learning, and that the hood was kind of a pain in the butt, and it really wasn't as effective as I thought it would be. So it actually created an increased draw time for me to the point where I wasn't comfortable, and I was just said screw it, and I cut it off with a hacksaw. So that's that story. So from now on, I'll only get a level 2. As you can tell, I also have a flashlight holder on my holster, something I'll get to later. Next, this is a little safety knife type thing made by Benchmade. It's good for, if someone's hanging themselves or you need to cut a seatbelt and you can't get to your knife. It's just an extra tool. I also have it there for a spacer. So instead of putting a bunch of belt keepers there, I realized that if I put this here, it works as a spacer to keep my tourniquet, which the tourniquet really doesn't move on the belt anyways, but I used to have my Baton back here. And I'll get a reason to why I don't carry that anymore here in a little bit. But it works as a good spacer because it's not going to move any more forward. It doesn't impede my draw at all. It doesn't get in the way, so it's just there. And it's there as a tool if I need it, and to keep my tourniquet if it ever does slide up. Next, I have my tourniquet. This has become a big thing in about the past, I'd say, year and a half with law enforcement, with people carrying tourniquets on their belt. If you don't have one on there, I'd recommend it. You never know, and God forbid you ever have to use it, but you know what, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Okay. Next is the slot for my next belt keeper, kind of a nice slot. Next is a glove pouch, okay? Only reason I carry this, honestly, besides, to have those gloves in case if I need them, like the purpose it serves, which I've, never used them, is to space out my belt keepers. So, and I do that because I wear suspenders at work. So the suspenders hook into the rear two belt keepers and the front two. So it helps separate the suspenders and make sure those belt keepers stay where they need to stay. So that's why I do that, and that's what works for me. Okay. Next is a radio holder. So, actually, let me back up. Okay. The biggest piece of advice that I can give you, okay, and this has been given to me from people who've lived it and stories I've heard of people breaking their backs, yada, 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 okay, so on and so forth. On your back, I would have as little stuff as possible. Like I would not have any handcuff cases, a baton, anywhere on your back. So if you're really skinny like me, you don't have a lot of hip room to work with. So a good rule of thumb I was taught, okay, and it's worked for me, and it helps with like comfort in the car and all that stuff. It helps all around. Try not to put anything past the back of your back hip bone. So basically hip bone to hip bone, I guess, is a way to look at it. Basically anything in that area is real estate. So anything behind that, try not to do. And that's why I have my tourniquet here, because that holds everything forward. And over here, well, it kind of moves on the left side, but that's what I have to work with. So that's just some good advice I'd give to you. Next is my radio holder. I like to have the ones with a bungee, and it goes over the radio, kind of common sense like. So it holds it in the holder, and if shit ever hits the fan, you want to always have all your gear as secure as possible. And going back to this, if you ever get knocked on your back or you slip on ice or yada yada yada, you can break your back if you have stuff in your back. Think about it. If you have an asp back here, let's just look at it. If you have an asp back here, okay, and let's say if you're fighting with somebody, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to do two hands here. If you're fighting with somebody and this thing, let's say it rotates to the inside, okay, so it's on here. Let's say it rotates, or it's straight up, so be it. And you fall on that, it's going to go right into your back. All that weight and this plastic's going to catch the ground before your back. It's a bad day. So that's another reason why I would not have anything on your back, because if you fall or whatever, so be it. You have all that force coming right down on your spine, and that's a good way to break your back, okay? Next, I have a belt keeper separating my taser and my radio, so the draw does not get affected by that. And what I mean is because from trial and error, like I said, you learn from trial and error. And it's a good rule of thumb to always have at least one spacer between your weapon. Like I said, on my right side, I've got my little Benchmade knife. On this side, I just have a belt keeper that separates my radio and my taser, so I never have to worry about it getting in the way. I can always draw it with ease and precision and no difficulty whatsoever. So before I had this, my radio got underneath my taser, and I could not draw my taser, and I didn't have to use it or anything, but I realized, I said, okay, this is an issue. So then that's when I started adding the belt keeper in between. And that's a very common thing you'll see, is people do that all the time. It's kind of tough to pull something out of the holster when you don't have it attached to anything. Alright, next is my flashlight. I recently moved this up front. Most people who have them up front have a different type of holder, like the ones where it snaps in. And that would probably be a good idea for me to look at, but for the time being, I have my same flashlight, and I like these kind of holders where it goes all the way through. So that's just me for that. I used to have it back here behind my radio, but I wanted to try it out, and it got to the point where when I switched to suspenders, like I said, I don't have a lot of real estate to work with, so it was making my suspenders get all like cattywampus, because I was having to put the light in between the radio and here, and it was sliding everything, so my suspenders were like crooked on my back, and it worked, but I wanted to try it out up here, so I did, and I like it. And it works. It's just something you got to train your brain to get used to where it's at. It's the same concept, okay? And like anything that's up front, you can obviously put away easier than something that's behind. So that's something else to keep in mind with that. And with this, okay, I'll just finish the belt real quick and then I'll go back, okay? Here's my slot for my other belt keeper right here. So that's where that goes, and then here's my 3 mag carrier, and that's that. So, when it comes to gear and flashlights especially, a good rule of thumb is if you have 1, you have none. If you have 2, you have 1. And if you have 3, you have 2. So I carry 3. I carry the 1 on my belt. I carry the 1 on my weapon, which I think is very extremely important. And I carry 1 on my shoulder, like a shoulder pen light thing, and they work hella good, especially nowadays. So, with that being concluded, let's talk about what some other options you can have that's worked for me. So I've used also cuff straps. I've tried this. These work well if you do put cuffs on your back, or a set of cuffs, because it keeps the cuffs down on your butt. So if you run into that issue of if you do fall or something, the cuffs should not hopefully hit you square in the spine. So that's something I have used. Let's not knock these off onto my foot. Now, many of you already noticed I don't carry a baton, okay? I recently got rid of my baton. Reason being is if you, and let me get this set up real quick, so give me 1 second, okay? I'll be right back. Alright, as I was saying, a big reason why I used to carry my baton back here, and then I'd carry my taser, or my tourniquet behind, and it got to the point where it was becoming an issue. Now let me explain why it was becoming an issue. It was becoming, it was becoming an issue because the tourniquet, with the holder I have with my baton, it rotates. A lot of people have these holders, and they work great because you can get to them. But these will sometimes rotate. If you have them on your belt, they'll rotate and they'll make it so they'll get into the way of your weapon. And what I mean by that is they can make it so it can get underneath your weapon, it can get on top of your weapon, it'll do some crazy shit. And you don't realize it until it's too late. So right now, if I had to draw my weapon right now, okay, let's say I got in a fight and I got up off the ground and my baton's turned sideways and it's underneath my weapon. Okay, how are you going to pull that weapon out? Exactly my point. You're going to have a hell of a time, and you don't have time. When you need to pull that weapon, you need to pull that weapon. Okay, so now you're not going to be able to get that weapon out, and that's one of the biggest things I've seen. So to combat this, if you do have a baton back here, okay, I would recommend, granted these holders are nice because if you need to use it and need to put it away while it's extended, yada yada yada, it's nice, but it rotates. I would get a holder for your baton that does not rotate. Get a solid holder that holds it like straight up and down. If you're going to carry a baton, that would be my advice, okay? So, and that's something that I learned through trial and error. And that's probably, along with like the spacer over here with the Taser, it's the same concept. I couldn't draw my Taser when my radio did that, when it got underneath. So, granted, that's why I have this extra spacer here. It doesn't really work with the baton, but it helps with it helps space. But probably the biggest thing the biggest piece of advice I can give you here is make sure that your gear, 1, you can use it properly, okay? 2, it's able to be secured on your belt, because everything on your belt you're responsible to secure and protect, and everything is a tool for you to use, but also a weapon that can be used against you, okay? That's a big reason I quit carrying a baton. It was not something that I wanted. 1, I was tired of dealing with it because I never used it, and it was a pain in the ass, like digging in my back and getting in the way of my weapon, yada, 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 and all that stuff. But 2, I didn't want to have the responsibility of securing it, and it was just easier for me to take it off and put a tourniquet there than it was to keep it there. But the biggest piece of advice is make sure nothing impedes your draw, gets in the way, whatever, with your weapon, okay? And with that, make sure your flashlight is always on your offhand. Like I told you, and you saw, I have I have a light on my flashlight. Hold on, this is totally, I know it's empty, but it's totally pointing at me, and I don't like that. Okay. with that, as I was saying, get your flashlight on your left side. Always have your right hand. Here's another rule of thumb as well. Your right hand, and this was something that was taught to me and I live by, should only be for your weapon. Okay. If you work in a jail and stuff, obviously, then you don't have a weapon in there, so a baton works well. But something that was taught to me and that I understand and that I believe in, this is just me, is your right hand should only be for your weapon. Because if you, let's say you have an asp out in your right hand, you need to draw your weapon. Okay? It comes down to a game of muscle memory and training your mind. If you've trained your mind to always put away your baton, you're more than likely going to try to put away your baton before you draw your weapon. You hear about crazy, crazy stories of cops doing stuff. It's like, why did they do that? It's because it's muscle memory. If you train yourself to always, shut your taser off at 2 seconds, you're going to shut your taser off at 2 seconds when you actually tase somebody. Okay? It's the same concept. So I just said, forget it. So that's why I took off an asp. It got out of the way of my weapon. And now I don't got to worry about it, and it is what it is. I think that sums it up, guys. Any comments, questions, anything like that, throw them in the comments section. I'll give you an answer. And please shoot me a subscribe. So thank you, guys. Have a good one.